So Nate, I've got your book here, Selling With, and it opens with a quote from Jeff Bezos on internal memos. Can you tell me what's the significance of that?
Yeah, so it's a bit of an obscure maybe quote to weave into the book, but it comes from one of his shareholder letters where he's unpacking the process that they use to make big decisions. And essentially what he's talking about is how over a series of conversations, they're writing to clarify their point of view on the direction that they need to go. And so what he's talking about is how people come together inside of a large organization to communicate internally and to pick a direction that they're going to go to either solve a problem or to address a certain priority. And I think it is a fascinating read for sellers to understand, which ultimately we're trying to do. Like, our job is to influence the outcome of a certain decision. And so we have to start by understanding the process that large companies are using in order to actually make a decision in those internal conversations.
That makes a lot of sense. And in the book, you say that buyers close deals and not sellers. What do you actually mean by that? Because do sellers serve no purpose?
No, so we're rewriting the job description for sellers. So buyers are the ones, more specifically champions are the ones who are closing deals because they are actually in the room when a buying decision is being made. So if you look at that point where all of like the meaty debates, decisions, problems, priorities, like that's happening behind closed doors.
Yeah.
So how can the seller be the one that is getting the deal closed if they're not even there? So then the question is like, okay, well, if the champion's closing the deal, then what's the job of the seller? And this is where we shift to, it's a two-part, very simple job description. First is to create a champion in every deal. Like if they're the definition of like an inside sales rep, the person who is selling, then one, you need to get them in place. And then second, you have to enable them. And so we're kind of shifting from just a sales enablement point of view where sales enablement is enabling the seller to go sell in a sales meeting, to now the account executive, the account manager, they're actually doing the enabling, helping that champion clarify their point of view to bring a really crisp message into those internal conversations where the decision will be made.
You have been a multiple-time sales leader. You are a leader of an organization. You've written a book. What is now the ideal seller profile then in this new way of selling?
Yeah, so I think about a couple different like traits or characteristics. So for example, I'm writing out a job description, I'm interviewing. What am I looking for in the candidate? So the first thing that I'm looking for is creativity, which as we begin to have a world where sellers are working with AI more and more and more, the way I would define creativity is the things that aren't in a training data set that AI can't produce. And so in a way, it's almost making the seller even more human because we want somebody who can create and think, partner with the AI, of course, but to do the things that only they can do. So it's not just somebody who has made a career in following the average middle of the road process. They're creative. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing that I would think about is thoughtfulness, the thoughtful seller. And when I say thoughtful, I don't mean like, oh, they make kind gestures, they send gifts. It's more about they spend a lot of time in deep thought, really trying to understand the nuance of what's happening inside of that customer's organization. And they're able to connect the dots and weave a pattern between all of these different conversations, contacts across a number of different business units in the buying team. And they're able to put that all together in a really cohesive way where somebody is like, wow, I wouldn't have thought of it like that. And then the last thing that I think about is like attention to detail, especially over time and like the typical arc of a seller's career. They're gonna start working in more complex deals, larger organizations over time. And that's where there's a premium for somebody who does the little things really, really well.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And you said, I want to hire people that have skills and qualities that machines can't replicate, right? And so what I'm hearing now is this sense of like self-awareness that they can be wrong, this sense of empathy that they actually want to like dive deep, and curiosity that they genuinely want that feedback, and it's a two-way street. Is it hard to find those sellers?
Yeah. It is. And what I found is that, so for example, like I never went through a formal sales training program. I started my career building valuation models to like put a number on the value of technology. And I've always been fascinated about how do you take skills and knowledge from different domains and then by analogy, learn to apply them to selling. And you start to unpack and get people with different skill sets that are broader. And that's where things like creativity, empathy comes from, because they've exercised them in different domains and different environments, as opposed to like, well, how does the playbook go? Like, let me know, like, how do you script empathy in a conversation, right? Like, that's like counterproductive. Like, you can't actually do that, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm a big fan of, like, you will find these traits if you look outside of your traditional profile of who a seller should be. And I'll give you like some of the like famous examples of this would be Arnold Schwarzenegger learning how to pose in a bodybuilding competition by taking ballet classes. Or like Kobe Bryant working on his footwork by taking tap dancing classes. Because they knew there are things outside of different characteristics outside of my field that I can take, adapt, and apply here. And I think it's the exact same thing when you're looking for the right profile of who you want to go out and hire and bring in. Take a slightly wider view. So,
Nate, we're talking about a lot of really important topics here, but I've been a seller, and I'll say that there have been times, I was early in career, okay?
Okay, all right.
Where I thought I had a champion, but I wasn't even in the deal, right? I mean, it happens, right? And so we know that building champions is incredibly crucial to winning. How can you tell if you actually have a champion?
Yeah, so it's a good question, because I think the word champion, or the term, is thrown around very loosely. So let's rewind back to, like, if you remember high school physics.
Don't make me go back.
I'm gonna put you on the spot. Do you remember the difference between kinetic and potential energy?
Slightly, but I'm gonna have you do a refresher.
Okay, so in terms of how we think about building champions, so potential only becomes kinetic energy when it is put into motion, right? So forward progress. Now, when you think about, like, what is a potential champion, or somebody who has the profile of even, like, could they become a champion at all? I think about it in terms of 3 I's: influence, incentive, and information. Influence, like, can they change and shape that internal conversation? Incentive, like, do they want to? Is there something in it for them that's tying them to the deal? And then lastly, information, like that hard to find kind of deal intelligence. Are they in the know? You see all of those things, you have the potential to become a champion, but being a champion is behavior-based. And so until there's evidence of moving the deal forward, like making progress internally, then you're not actually a champion. And so that's where the whole kind of principle or practice of beginning to test for the evidence of a champion comes into play.